Do you want to read them to me, or how do you want to go about it? Okay.
Please.
So you want me to read the question? Okay. All right. So, do you want me to read the question?
Yes.
Okay. So the first question is on the issue of waste. Take into account the geography. What do you think should be the policy to follow, to be followed by developing countries like Chile? So I think the first thing to think about is geography independent and perhaps culture independent, and that waste is just one part of the process for a material or an item. It's just one state of the process. And so what we call as waste actually is value to somebody else. And so we need to think about how we can repurpose the waste stream so that we get maximum value out of it. Because many of the things that we discard today are materials that have tremendous value for can be repurposed, recycled, reused. There's a lot of embodied energy associated with them, both in terms of producing energy, but also the energy that was used to create those materials in the first place. So that's independent of any geography or society. Is about value that's in the waste stream and creating policies and procedures that extract that value to the maximum extent possible in a economically practical and financially pragmatic way.
Okay. The next.
Yeah, so let me just see if there's anything else I should put on that.
Is how important demographic change in waste generation.
And one more thing on the first, just on the first thing, you might want to add in there too. It's about the, given that you have that a waste stream is also a value stream. You also the process or the approach that you use to managing that waste stream is very much going to be community, region, society, socially variable, depending on what the particular value stream is and how you can get that out of the waste itself. So what works in one country may not be appropriate for another. So tailoring it to the community, to the country, to the conditions is equally as important as understanding the value that's in the waste stream.
Okay.
So demography. How do demographic changes affect waste generation? And if Latin America continues to grow, how much does this influence the strategy? Affluence and waste generation are directly related. In fact, as we become more affluent, we tend to consume more and generate more waste. That's a pretty well-known phenomenon. And so as quality of life grows anywhere in the world, the production of waste and the value in the waste stream also tends to increase as well. So recognizing that is important, and recognizing that as your society changes, both in terms of its priorities and its affluence, the waste stream will change as well. And so your strategies have to change as the society changes along with it. So being prepared for that is important.
Okay.
All right?
Okay. The third.
Third question. All right.
Chile always look.
Yeah. Chile always looks to other countries as an example. How much should the national idiosyncrasy be used, or should we be using other practices? This is a good question. So, one of the things that you want to do is create practices that are sustainable themselves. So, and that's going to be very much culturally independent. You won't be able to import somebody else's practice and necessarily make it apply to your society or your waste stream or your economic situation. It has to be tailored to the community and the society in which you're going to operate that practice. So it's very useful to look at analogs in other countries. You want to learn from other people's experience, lessons learned, both their successes and their failures. Take what you can from those experiences that is beneficial, blend it in with your own knowledge of your local community, and create a strategy that's going to be practical, economical, and sustainable. The strategy itself has to be sustainable too. It has to be able to be self-propagating. But it all comes back to trying to get the value out. And the value of the waste stream here is going to be different from the value of the waste stream in some other countries. So you need to be cognizant about that when you develop the strategy and the policy. All right?
In Chile, the waste is treated organically.
Okay, so, yeah. So there's always a challenge when we have a way that we've done things, a process that we've followed. For example, we're used to disposing waste in mass, not separating and recycling components. And then there's always frequently from different advocacy groups or different groups that have a different perspective that practice ought to change. And one of the things that we need to think about is the changes is how do we create change is by articulating the value in that change. For example, we don't want to recycle just because it's good to recycle. We want to recycle because getting the value out of that waste stream is important. It's economical, it makes good sense in terms of material resource generation and conservation, makes good sense in terms of energy. It has to be based on a logical argument as opposed to an evangelical or advocacy argument. With that said, one of the other things that we know is that we tend to be, as humans, we tend to do things the way we have historically. And we tend to think of ourselves as being very nimble and flexible people, but in fact we don't really none of us like to change too much. And so often when we're kind of stuck, we need to create incentives that push people in a different direction. So public policy can be created to drive different ways of managing the waste stream. We've done that very successfully in the state that I live in. We also create, and one of the things I think is particularly important is not only about creating policy, but also about creating incentives that couple with policy. So we have a policy that perhaps promotes recycling, and we have an incentive program, perhaps through taxation, that provides an economic process by which to engage in recycling and then develop a business model that in itself will perpetuate regardless of what the historic practice has been. And so that's really the important part, not necessarily what we've done or perhaps what we want to do, but creating a system in place that will drive people in a particular direction based on the value that there is in the system.
Okay, okay. And the last question is, how should be considered innovation in the field of waste?
I answered some of this so already. Just, how do we innovate? What type of technology should you be using here? Should you be pulling some technology from somewhere else, or should you be using a strategy that's homegrown and unique to Chile? And it's probably going to be some combination of the two, right? But the strategy that works somewhere else, it can't be just dropped in place here. You're going to have to create something that's consistent with the things that are important to your society. And so it will have to be customized. And that's where the opportunity exists as well, because if there's economic opportunity and there's also a conservation perspective which is of interest to many people in society, that creates a lot of interest in innovation and a lot of creative ideas and thinking about how we might manage the system differently. When you take people's commitment to something like conservation, can combine that with an economic incentive from business, that's a powerful combination that creates a lot of innovation and strategies and technologies which are very much relevant and directly applicable to your particular society. And they'll probably be different than are used other places. There'll probably be some similarities, but unique aspects as well.
Okay, okay. Truly important technology or seeking internal developments in the last.
Okay. Should we consider internal developments? I think you want to consider internal developments, and that is really one of the attributes of the solution being somewhat unique to the location, because every location has its unique characteristics, and so you're going to have to develop your own internal approaches to things. And you're going to want to use other people's as well. It's going to be a combination. But again, it's about the things that drive that are economic opportunity and also a commitment to change. And when you put those together, you will create that internal process.
Okay.
Okay? Does that help?
For your time.
Yeah.